I never thought I'd be the kind of man who strayed. That sentence alone tastes bitter in my mouth, like cheap whiskey that burns going down. But maybe if I start with honesty, the rest will follow. My name's Daniel. I'm 32 years old, and I've been with Claire for almost 10 years. We met in college. I was studying architecture, she was in literature. I still remember the first time I saw her. She was sitting cross-legged on the grass outside the library, headphones on, eyes glued to some massive novel I couldn't have carried without a backpack. She looked untouchable, in the way some people do when they're wrapped up in a world you can't see. But then she laughed at something in the book, and I thought, I need to know her. We've built a life since then. A small apartment in the city, 2 cats, quiet Sunday mornings where she makes coffee strong enough to wake the dead. We've had our fights, like anyone. Bills. Stress. My long hours at the firm. Her long stretches of grading papers late into the night. But we've always found our way back to each other. At least I thought so. Looking back, the cracks were subtle. We'd fall asleep at different times. Dinner turned into silence broken only by phones buzzing on the table. Our conversations drifted toward logistics, rent, groceries, who was taking the car in for inspection. Somewhere along the line, the fire we'd had in our 20s dimmed. Not gone, just quieter, like embers under ash. Then came her. Her name was Maya. She started at my firm about a year ago, junior designer, full of restless energy, the kind of person who seemed allergic to stillness. She was 10 years younger than me, though she carried herself like she had nothing to prove. She asked questions boldly, challenged my designs in meetings, laughed too loud at things that weren't even that funny. And when she looked at you, it was with this piercing attention, as if you were the only person in the room. I didn't notice her in that way at first. Or maybe I forced myself not to. I introduced her to Claire once at a company mixer. Claire smiled politely, said she seemed sweet. Maya told me later she thought Claire was elegant, like she should be in a French film. I laughed, but something about the way she said it lingered. The turning point was stupidly small. Late night at the office, just the two of us. I was hunched over a set of blueprints, exhausted, frustrated. She came by with 2 coffees, slid one onto my desk. "You look like you need this more than me," she said. I don't remember what I muttered in response, but I do remember the warmth of the cup in my hands, the way she leaned against the edge of my desk and asked me about Claire. Not in a prying way, just casual, like she wanted to know the man behind the sketches. I told her how we'd met, how long we'd been together. She smiled and said, "That's rare these days." And then, softer, "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if you'd chosen differently back then?" The question sank into me like a stone in water. I laughed it off at the time, but the ripples spread long after she left my office that night. I went home to Claire, who was already asleep on the couch, her laptop still open beside her. I kissed her forehead, tucked a blanket around her, and tried to shake the feeling that something had shifted. It was just one coffee. One question. But that's how it begins, isn't it? It didn't happen all at once. That's the lie people tell themselves when they want to believe they're in control, that they'll see the danger coming, that they'll have time to stop before the edge. But the truth is, it's small steps, barely noticeable until you're already running downhill and can't stop. With Maya, it started with little things. She'd linger at my desk after meetings, asking about details she could have easily handled herself. She started leaving me notes on my sketches, tiny doodles in the margins, playful, teasing. At first I rolled my eyes, but I never erased them. I told myself it was harmless. She was young, energetic, and I was just flattered. That's all. Everyone likes to feel seen. One evening, after another late night at the office, we ended up in the elevator together. She leaned against the wall, watching me. "You work too much," she said. "Comes with the territory," I replied. "Or maybe," she said, her voice lowering, "you're just trying to avoid going home." The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that home was exactly where I wanted to be. But the truth caught in my throat. Lately, walking through the door felt like walking into a museum, quiet, orderly, lifeless. Claire and I coexisted more than we lived. "I go home," I said finally, but even I heard how weak it sounded. Maya just smiled, like she knew something I didn't. The first real lie I told Claire came a week later. Maya asked me to stay after work to help her with a design pitch. We ended up ordering takeout, eating at my desk while laughing about the client's impossible demands. At some point, she leaned across my desk to point at something on my laptop, and her hand brushed mine. Just a graze. But my heart kicked in my chest like it was trying to escape. When I got home that night, Claire was waiting. "Late again?" she asked, her voice calm but edged. "Client deadline," I said. The lie slid out smoothly, practiced, as if I'd been preparing for it. Her eyes searched mine for a moment, then she nodded. I kissed her cheek and went to shower, trying not to see the faint disappointment on her face. After that, it became easier. Drinks after work. With the team. Though really it was just Maya and me. Text messages that started about projects and drifted into jokes, memes, personal confessions. She told me about her exes, her fears, her ambitions. I told her things I hadn't said out loud in years. How I felt stuck, how sometimes I wondered if Claire and I were just going through the motions. She listened. Really listened. And that felt like oxygen after years of shallow breaths. The night it went too far, it didn't feel planned. It was raining, hard enough that the city seemed blurred. We were the last two in the office again. She stood by the window, watching the downpour, her reflection framed in the glass. "You ever feel," she said quietly, "like you're living someone else's life?" I walked over, stood beside her. "All the time." She turned to me then, eyes wide, searching. And in that moment, every line I thought I'd drawn dissolved. She leaned in first, or maybe I did, I can't remember. All I know is that when her lips touched mine, the world tilted. It was reckless, electric, a jolt straight to the core of me. I should have pulled away. I should have thought of Claire, of the years we'd built together. Instead, I let the kiss deepen until we were pressed against the window, the storm raging outside while another one erupted inside me. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Maya whispered, "You don't have to be unhappy." The guilt hit me the second I drove home. Claire was in bed, asleep, the lamp still on. I stood there in the doorway, watching her chest rise and fall, and felt like the worst kind of coward. I told myself it was a mistake. Just one kiss. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Once the first line is crossed, the rest fall faster than you expect. That kiss was supposed to be the end, at least that's what I told myself. But telling yourself something and living it are two different beasts. The truth is, I went back to her the very next night. And the one after that. At first, it was stolen moments. A lingering touch when no one was watching. Meetings that ran long. Drinks that stretched into laughter. Laughter that slid into whispers, whispers that ended in her lips on my skin. By the time we finally ended up in her apartment, it felt inevitable, like the gravity between us had been pulling me there from the start. I'd never been reckless before. I'd always been steady, dependable, the man who kept promises. But with Maya, all that cracked. With her, I felt alive again, raw, wanted, as if someone had ripped the dust sheet off my life and let the colors show through. And yet, every morning, I went home to Claire. She'd hand me coffee, ask me how I'd slept, talk about her students, about what we needed from the grocery store. I nodded, smiled, kissed her cheek. And all the while, I carried a secret that grew heavier each day. The lies multiplied like weeds. "I've got to stay late. The client wants revisions. Traffic was a nightmare." At first, she seemed to believe them. Or maybe she wanted to. But Claire is sharp, sharper than I ever gave her credit for. I started catching the way her eyes lingered on me, the pauses before she answered, the faint edge in her voice when I walked through the door smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't hers. One night she asked directly, "Daniel, are you happy?" The question gutted me. She wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing. She was just searching. I swallowed, forced a smile, and said, "Of course I am." She nodded, but I saw the flicker of doubt. And the guilt clawed deeper into my chest. But guilt is a strange thing. It coexisted with the hunger. The nights with Maya burned through me like wildfire. The way she laughed, the way she looked at me as though I was the only man who mattered. She said things Claire never did, told me I was brilliant, that I deserved more, that I was wasting myself in a half-life. I drank it in like water after a drought, even though it left me thirstier every time. Then came the jealousy. It was subtle at first. Maya would ask about Claire, how long we'd been together, what she was like. She pretended curiosity, but I could hear the edge beneath it. One night, after we'd been tangled in her sheets, she whispered, "Do you ever think about leaving her?" I froze. Maya. Her eyes searched mine, fierce, demanding. "I don't want to be just your secret." I had no answer. Because the truth was, I didn't want to lose Claire. For all the fire I found with Maya, Claire was my anchor, my history, my home. She knew me in ways no one else did. She'd seen me at my worst and stayed. She was part of my bones. But Maya was the spark I thought I'd lost forever. I tried to balance both, like a man walking a tightrope with no net. Days with Claire, nights with Maya. Smiles at the dinner table, then passion in the shadows. I told myself I could keep the two worlds separate, that no one had to get hurt. But of course, that was a lie too. Because the cracks were widening. And soon, everything I was balancing would come crashing down. Secrets don't stay buried forever. They leave traces, shadows, cracks in the walls you think are solid. And eventually, someone notices. For me, it started with small slips. I called Claire Maya once, half asleep in the morning. I laughed it off, said I'd been thinking about work. She smiled, but her eyes hardened. I caught it, even if she said nothing. Another time, I left my phone on the counter while I showered. When I came back, Claire was standing there, staring at it. She didn't say a word, just handed it back, but my stomach turned to stone. And Maya, she was growing restless. We were lying in her bed one night, the sheets still warm. She propped herself up on one elbow and asked, "How long are we going to do this?" "Do what?" I said, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Hide. Pretend I don't exist. Pretend you're not mine when you walk out that door." Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with frustration. She wanted more. She wanted all of me. And I couldn't give it. "Maya," I said carefully, "I can't just walk away from Claire. We've been together almost a decade. We share a life." Her jaw tightened. "So what am I then? Just your escape? Your little secret you can run to when you're bored at home?" Her words cut sharper than I expected. Because wasn't that the truth? As much as I told myself it was love, that it was real, part of me knew Maya was the fire I fed to keep from freezing. But fire burns. That night we fought. She told me she was done waiting, that if I couldn't choose her, maybe I didn't deserve her. I left her apartment shaking, my chest hollow, my mind screaming. When I walked into our place, Claire was at the table. She wasn't grading papers or sipping tea. She was just sitting there, waiting. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched on the table. I felt my throat close. "Okay." She looked straight at me, and in her eyes I saw everything, suspicion, hurt, but also a strange, fragile hope. "Daniel, are you seeing someone?" The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled too tight. My heart pounded in my ears. I opened my mouth, closed it again. The lie was right there, waiting, but my tongue felt heavy. Finally I whispered, "Yes." It was like stabbing her with my own hands. Her face crumpled, not into rage, but into something worse, quiet devastation. "How long?" she asked. "A few months," I admitted. My voice shook. "It wasn't supposed to, it just..." She raised her hand, stopping me. "Don't," Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stood, walked past me into the bedroom, and closed the door. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair, feeling the world tilt beneath me. For the first time, the fantasy cracked. The double life was gone. The lie was out. And there was no way to go back. I drove to Maya's that night, desperate, half-drunk on panic. She opened the door, saw my face, and smiled like she'd won. "You told her," she said. I couldn't answer. I just sank onto her couch, my head in my hands. She wrapped her arms around me, whispering, "It's okay. You'll see, we'll be happy now." But her embrace felt different. Heavier. For the first time, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like chains. Because even as I sat there, with Maya holding me, all I could think about was Claire, the way her voice broke, the way she looked at me like I'd killed something sacred. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Maya wasn't my future. She was my mistake. The days after the confession felt like living in a house that had already burned down, walls still standing, but everything inside reduced to ash. Claire barely spoke to me. She went about her routines, coffee in the morning, leaving for work, coming home late, but without words, without warmth. I slept on the couch. Every time I heard her footsteps, my chest tightened with the urge to beg, to throw myself at her feet, to promise I'd fix it. But I didn't. Because what promise could mean anything now? Maya, on the other hand, was alive with certainty. She texted constantly, "When are you moving in? When can we start fresh? This is the beginning, Daniel." But the more she pushed, the more the walls seemed to close in. Being with her didn't feel like freedom anymore. It felt like running, like hiding from the wreckage I'd made. One night, Claire finally broke the silence. She stood in the doorway of the living room, arms crossed. "Do you love her?" she asked. I sat up, hard hammering. "I thought I did." Her eyes narrowed. "And now?" I swallowed hard. "Now? I don't know. What I do know is that I love you." Her laugh was short, bitter. "You don't get to say that, Daniel. You don't get to break me and then hand me the word love like it's a bandage." Her voice cut deeper than any scream could have. "Why?" she whispered. "Was I not enough?" I felt tears sting my eyes. "It wasn't about that. Claire, you are everything. I was the one who wasn't enough. I wanted fire, excitement, something new, and I forgot what mattered. I forgot you." Her chin trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she shook her head slowly, as if she were looking at a stranger. That night I couldn't stay. I grabbed my jacket and drove to Maya's. She opened the door with a smile, pulled me inside, kissed me hard. But even as her hands touched me, I felt nothing but emptiness. Afterward, lying in her bed, she curled against me and whispered, "Now it's just us." And that's when it hit me. I didn't want it to be just us. I didn't want a future built on lies, on destruction, on the ashes of the woman who had given me her heart for a decade. I pulled away, sat up, and buried my face in my hands. "Maya, I can't do this." Her head snapped up. "What are you talking about? I can't leave Claire. I don't want this anymore. I want my life back." Her expression hardened instantly. "So that's it? You used me, and now you're crawling back to your safe little marriage?" "It wasn't using you," I said softly. "I cared about you. But I made a mistake. Claire she's home. She's my life. And I won't throw that away." Her eyes filled with angry tears. "You'll regret this, Daniel. You'll regret choosing her over me." Maybe she was right. But as I walked out of her apartment for the last time, I felt something I hadn't in months: clarity. When I got home, Claire was sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. I stood there, unsure if I even had the right to speak. Finally I said, "I ended it. With her. For good." She didn't look at me. "And you think that fixes everything?" "No," I admitted. "I know it doesn't. I know I've broken us. But I don't want anyone else. I want you." and I'll spend however long it takes proving that I can be the man you deserve, if you'll let me." The silence stretched, heavy and endless. Finally, Claire looked up, and in her eyes I saw everything: the pain, the betrayal, but also, faint, fragile, the love that hadn't died. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "Then let me stay until you know. That's all I ask." She didn't answer. But she didn't tell me to leave either. And that was the first small miracle. People think the hardest part of infidelity is the betrayal itself, the lies, the cheating, the moment of discovery. But the truth? The hardest part comes after, in the silence that follows, when both people have to decide whether there's anything left to salvage from the wreckage. Claire didn't forgive me overnight. She didn't forgive me at all, not at first. What she gave me was a sliver of space, the chance to stay, to try, to prove that I wasn't just sorry, but willing to change. Those first weeks were brutal. She barely spoke to me beyond necessities. Meals were eaten in silence. Nights were spent apart, her in our bed, me on the couch. I offered to leave more than once, to give her the peace she deserved. Each time, she said, "If I wanted you gone, you'd be gone." It wasn't mercy. It was a test. I threw myself into repairing what I could. I deleted Maya's number, blocked her on everything. I stayed late at work only when Claire knew exactly why. Every night, no matter how awkward the silence, I came home to her. But the shadows lingered. Sometimes I'd catch Claire looking at me, her face unreadable, and I knew she was wondering what I'd been doing when I wasn't with her. Sometimes I'd reach for her hand, and she'd let me, but her fingers stayed stiff, unmoving. Trust, once shattered, doesn't come back whole. It comes back jagged, fragile, with cracks that never fully disappear. We started therapy. At first, I thought it would be our salvation. But the sessions were grueling. Claire sat across from me, her voice flat as she described how I'd gutted her, how she couldn't look at me without feeling like a fool. I wanted to disappear under the weight of her words. "Why should I believe anything you say now?" she asked once, her voice breaking. I had no clever answer, no defense. All I could say was the truth. "You shouldn't. Not yet. All I can do is keep showing up, every day, until maybe one day you can." Slowly, painfully slowly, the ice began to thaw. It started with little things. She let me sit beside her on the couch again. She laughed once at a story I told about a coworker. She began answering my good morning greetings with something more than silence. The first night she let me back into our bed, we didn't touch. We just lay there, side by side, our breathing uneven. But it felt monumental, like the first brick laid on a broken foundation. Months passed. The wound didn't vanish, but it began to scar over. We talked, really talked, in ways we hadn't in years. About the loneliness we'd both been feeling. About the distance that had crept between us long before Maya ever appeared. About the mistakes we'd both made in letting our marriage drift into routine instead of fighting to keep it alive. One evening, Claire said something that shook me. "I'm not forgiving you for what you did. I may never fully forgive you. But I'm choosing to stay. Because I still see something worth saving." Tears filled my eyes. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a clean slate. But it was hope. And maybe that's what real love is, not the fire, not the passion, not the dizzying rush of newness. Maybe it's the decision to stay, even when it hurts. The decision to rebuild brick by broken brick, because walking away would mean losing something irreplaceable. Claire and I were scarred. We always would be. But we were still standing. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that maybe, just maybe, we had a future. It's been years now. Enough time that the raw wounds have healed into scars, and the chaos of that time feels like someone else's life, and yet still mine, inescapably. Claire and I are still together. If you'd asked me back then, on that night when she closed the bedroom door on me after learning the truth, I would have told you it was impossible. That I'd lost her forever. Sometimes, I still don't know how she found the strength to stay. But she did. We're not the same as we were before. How could we be? Trust once broken never comes back pure. There are cracks in our history that nothing will erase. There are still days when I catch her watching me a little too long, like she's weighing the truth of who I am now against the lies I once told. And I can't blame her for that. But there's something stronger between us too, a kind of honesty that didn't exist before. We talk about everything now. Even the ugly things, the insecurities, the fears. Especially those. Because silence was where the distance grew, and that silence almost killed us. People sometimes ask me, quietly, if it was worth it, the affair, the drama, the pain. They ask like they want me to say yes, like passion is worth destroying everything for. But the answer is no. It wasn't worth it. Maya was a fire I thought I needed, but all she did was burn through everything I built. She made me feel alive, yes, but in the way jumping off a cliff makes you feel alive, right before you hit the ground. She wanted all of me, but what she really wanted was the part of me that was still tethered to Claire. Without that, I don't think she would have wanted me at all. Claire, she was never perfect. Neither was I. But she was real. She was steady. She was the person who knew me in the quiet, ordinary moments that make up a life. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not the fire, not the thrill, but the choice to stand beside each other when everything else had fallen apart. If I learned anything, it's this: love isn't about never straying, never faltering, never breaking. Love is about what you do after. It's about whether you fight to come back, whether you're willing to rebuild on the ruins. I betrayed her once. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I won't do it again. And some nights, when Claire slips her hand into mine while we're watching TV, or when she leans her head against my shoulder in quiet contentment, I feel something I can't quite explain. Not just gratitude, not just relief. Something deeper. Maybe it's love. The kind that survives fire. The kind that knows what it almost lost, and never takes it for granted again.